morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I had to change my time to 10:30 because I wanted to get the last minute of the wonderful under the cover moment. Well, anyway, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back. We are continuing to hear the should I say confession of a Playboy girl, Bunny? I don't know what to call it, but we're listening to Holly Madison's book on her account of her time there at the mansion, um, the Playboy mansion, that is, and understanding that what glitter is not always gold, guys. What glitter is not always gold. Um, she talks about the different things that Hugh Hefner had, like the rules. I saw so many crimes according to her agree account of what happened at the mansion. But I also saw willing participants. Willing participant. Just like in R. Kelly case, willing participant. This man has had so many women. And remember, I told you I'm going to play the Brooke Shields also. Because guys, I want you guys to understand that these people, well, let me just keep my thoughts to myself on this one because it's like two laws, y'all. Two sets of laws. And let me tell you something. I'm gonna use the word that Spitfire always use: cultural obligation. Cultural obligation. That is Spitfire's word, and that's something we do not have, but people of the Caucasian persuasion does have that cultural obligation. So I'm gonna continue playing this for you guys. If you have, did anybody have any questions before I start? Anybody have any questions? Let me give you a moment to see if y'all have any questions. Got to get my water down. Anybody have any question? Good morning, Joycelyn. Anybody have any question before I begin? And I just hope nobody keep sending me messages because when I play it through this, there's always messages. You know what? I have it on my. I'm gonna play it from my computer. That's what I'll do. I'll play it from my computer. No, can I play it from my computer? Yeah, the Playboy Mansion. Yes, Lawanda. Okay, I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna keep it here because you know what happened every time I use the phone, somebody's always sending me messages. Stop sending me messages. Because it pauses the phone. Stop freaking. How do I turn my phone off? I have a Galaxy. How do I turn it off from getting messages? Let me see if I can put it on Do Not Disturb. Can I put it on Do Not Disturb? Will I be able to play it if it's on airplane mode? Will I still be able to play it? Okay, I'm going to put it on airplane mode and see if I still play it. Hold on. Okay, it's on airplane mode. But it disconnect from Wi-Fi. Okay, let's see. It's not playing on airplane mode. It's not playing. It's not playing because you need the Wi-Fi. Hold on. Okay, gotta take it off airplane mode. Sorry. Put it on do not disturb. Okay, how do I put do not disturb on the phone? Do not disturb. Let's see. It's on do not disturb already. Put it on do not. But the text messages still comes on. Okay, we're just gonna go ahead and play it. Let me see. Hold on, I'm trying to see what I can do to get it to them not to bother me. Hold on. Trying to see. Gonna go in settings. I need the notification from the what's the name to stop. Okay, setting notification. Okay, I got it muted for. Okay, I think I got it, y'all. I muted for the time for us to Okay, I think I got it. I think I got it, people. All right, I think I got it muted. Hold on a second. I got mute for a second. Hold on. I'm downloading it so it can play. Hold on a second. Just 1 second. Good morning, everybody. It's downloading for in a few minutes, so just give me a moment while it's being downloaded to my library. How's everybody doing this morning? Good morning to everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Sunshine, rise and shine. Rise and shine. Good morning to everybody. All right, I think I'm ready to play it. Chapter. Okay, ready? This is the chapter 5, I think it's going to. You ready, guys? Give me thumbs up if you're ready. Thank you for my heart, Candy. Candy gave me my hearts. I think Candy's the only one that came in with the hearts. No, I'm sorry, I missed the others. No, Candy is the only one that's been giving me my hearts. Yep. Okay, thank you, Candy. And Lisa gave me my heart. Lisa and Candy, thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Put my disclosure up. Thank you, Treese. Thank you, Kimberly. Hey, you guys seen Black Beauty? Have you guys seen Black Beauty? You know, when I don't see my peeps, I get concerned because I finally saw my Rita, because my regular people I'm looking for. Okay. All right, y'all ready? Here we go. We're gonna play this one. So hopefully we'll get no disturbance from this phone, because I did turn off the and let me just plug in the hold on a second. I'm gonna plug it in so you don't run out of juice. Just 1 second. I'm plugging the phone in so it can stay fully charged. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the disclaimer. Thank you, Joyce. Lynn, thank you, Tree. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. Oh, Lord, it's early this morning, hiccups. All right, you ready? All right, here we go.
5. Alice thought the whole thing very absurd, but they all looked so grave that she did not dare to laugh. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Over the year I lived with her at the mansion, Vicky became increasingly hostile. She wanted desperately to be a playmate, but Hef was done making girlfriends centerfolds. Only we didn't know that then. Hef still let the possibility linger, knowing it was the key to attracting and keeping countless young girlfriends. Earning playmate status became Vicky's obsession. A new crop of girls had moved into the mansion over the past year, and Vicky was hell-bent on beating this new group to the coveted title. It seemed to me that she felt her seniority in the group gave her an edge or made her an exception when it came to snagging herself a centerfold. If he's not going to give me a centerfold, I'm at least going to get everything I can out of this place. Vicky fumed in my general direction. She had invited me to her room to talk, something we hadn't done since my earliest days at the mansion. After Lisa became a centerfold and moved out a few months earlier, Vicky moved up into one of the largest of the rooms designated for girlfriends. I watched as she stumbled around the large pink room, trying to avoid tripping over the piles of junk she'd amassed in every corner, including those covering a long white couch that had occupied the room since the 80s. She motioned that I grab a seat on her bed, but I was unsure how to navigate the journey. I was fairly certain that this particular room had plush white carpeting, but you couldn't see the ground anywhere. Random trinkets, mementos, and tchotchkes were scattered about. A skateboard collection, a wall full of Barbie dolls still in their original packaging, an oversized aquarium, a ping pong table covered with Hello Kitty merchandise, an oversized disco ball, and a stable of inflatable unicorns. I mean, I love me some camp, but this was enough to make Angeline cringe. If getting everything she could out of this place meant becoming a hoarder, then she was succeeding with flying colors, many of which were shades of pink. I noticed that she had a piece of paper taped over a vent on the wall. "What's that?" I asked. Vicky looked over her shoulder. "Oh, that?" she asked, pointing towards the vent. I nodded. "The girls who were in here last night put that up," she nonchalantly explained. "They were up here smoking meth, and it has this, really foul smell, like rotten eggs, so they covered up the vent." I nodded again, hoping the shock and amusement wasn't readable on my face. "They knew if the smell made its way down to the butler's pantry, someone might figure it out and bust them," she continued. "Huh," I said, going through a mental Rolodex of her girlfriends to figure out which ones she was talking about. "Speaking of the other girls," Vicky began, a new focus in her voice, "you know I can't stand Diana, right?" "No, I didn't," I replied. How would I know who was on Vicky's list of enemies? At the ripe old age of 29, Diana was one of the oldest in this new crop of girlfriends. She was beautiful, but there was something a little off about her. She had wild, violent mood swings and looked more like an attractive 40-something with a face full of Botox and fillers than a 29-year-old. Okay, well, you know how when you do coke, there's like a pile in the center with some lines next to it for people to do? She paused. It took me a second to realize she was waiting on me to respond. Quickly, I nodded. I didn't do it myself, but I'd been offered cocaine countless times since moving in. It was definitely the drug of choice among the girls of the mansion. Apparently satisfied with my response, she continued. "Well, Diana doesn't do the lines. She does the whole fucking pile." Her eyes were wild as her arms flew in the air. "It's like, bring your own shit." I wondered if Vicky was high this very moment. It would explain her spastic behavior and even why she invited me into her room in the first place. "You know Amanda, that new playmate?" she asked, jumping to the next subject without missing a beat. I actually had an answer for this one. Yes, I exclaimed. I'd only met Amanda a handful of times while she was shooting her pictorial, but the wholesome dark haired beauty definitely left an impression. She possessed an air about her like she just walked off the pageant stage. I always noted her impeccable manners, a rarity in the playmate world. I really like her. She's so pretty and seems really classy. Well, she's not, Vicky whirled around with a huff. Apparently, that was the wrong answer because Vicky unleashed her Amanda focused tirade. Don't you ever wonder, for a girl to want to pose nude, there has to be something wrong with her, right? I kept my mouth shut. Her eyes narrowed in on me as she waited for my response. It seemed like a loaded question since both Vicky and I were eager to become playmates. I thought she might be getting to some sort of point, perhaps whatever it was that motivated her to ask me to her room in the first place. Well, she makes a lot of money, Vicky finally said, her claws momentarily retracted. Like thousands of dollars a night. Actually, almost all of the playmates make that kind of money. Vicky paused, waiting for me to take the bait and ask how they made that kind of money. She took a seat on top of what appeared to be a small mound of dirty clothes on the white couch and began casually petting the tiny dog that had crawled into her lap. After it was clear I wasn't biting, she continued her story on her own. Take Carrie, for example, she continued, her eyes on the little animal. A recent playmate, Carrie was a 21-year-old with a 16-year-old face. She had striking green eyes, but no personality. I remembered seeing her a few days earlier at the Fun in the Sun party droning on about her swimsuit. Do these look like pumpkins? She'd asked Vicky, stretching her orange-dotted Dior bikini over her chest. Wow, I remembered thinking. Playmates must make some pretty good money to be able to afford Dior bikinis. Well, Vicky continued, snapping me back to the present, she has a lot of sugar daddies. One pays for her apartment, one pays her bills, one takes her shopping. No way, I shouted, unintentionally cutting Vicky off. Rumors of playmates working for high-class escort agencies had plagued Playboy for decades, but it wasn't common knowledge, and I'd never heard of it firsthand before. Yeah, Vicky said with a carefree laugh, and everybody does it. And as casually as if she were inviting me to tea, she asked, Do you think it might be something you'd be interested in? No way, I said, almost laughing. Was she really asking me if I'd consider becoming a hooker? Sure, I'd made a bad decision moving into the mansion, but I wasn't down for full on prostitution. She wasn't going to get me this time. My eyes fell on Vicky and I quickly adjusted my expression. I couldn't be certain, but I was fairly sure our newly rekindled friendship would be short lived. I mean, I sputtered, uselessly trying to recover. That's just not something I'm into. Her face was starting to morph from terribly offended to wildly angry. I kept talking, hoping it would stave off the shitstorm I had just walked into. I mean, it's just a little much for me. There's nothing special about it. I floundered, trying in vain to come up with anything that might not piss Vicky off. I could feel the blood pumping in my cheeks, certain I was bright red. Vicky had just opened the door to her secret little world, and I slammed it in her face. Okay, whatever, she spat. Hey, I need to get ready, so I'll see you later, okay? Okay, I said, recognizing that it was my cue to leave. Oh my God, I thought. I can't wait to tell Bridget about this. I came to believe that Vicky was working for Hollywood Madam Michelle Braun, the owner and operator of the high-end escort service Nikki's Girls. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Nikki was the premier madam who prided herself on a reputation of having the most exclusive girls in the business, many of which were playmates and even some of Hef's own girlfriends. In a 2009 New York Post article, Braun boasted, At one time, 7 of the 8 girls living in the mansion were working for me. I had one of his girlfriends in the mansion just to recruit for me. When I read this article, it was obvious to me that Vicky must have been her recruiter. I compared notes with a few of the other girlfriends and found that they had also been approached by Vicky. One of the girls said Vicky had confided in her that she got a cut or fee for the girls she was able to introduce to Braun. Girls were routinely convinced that these men were willing to pay a premium for simply the pleasure of their company and not necessarily for sex. But from what I understand, that was almost never the case. While I was at the mansion, there were a handful of girlfriends who refused the invitation to hook. Bridget was never even approached, but I have no idea what went on before I got there. A few years ago, Braun's client and employee list, circa 1999, surfaced on the web. Gossip site HollywoodInterrupted.com published the documents. Among the many notable names were Hef's former girlfriends Mandy and Sandy Bentley, as well as his former main girlfriend Tina Jordan. In 2009, Braun was indicted after pleading guilty to transporting women across state lines for the purpose of prostitution and money laundering, and was sentenced to 3 years probation and 6 months of house arrest. The women were tempted with the lavish life that $1,000 weekly.
Did y'all hear that? That person got 3 years probation. Did y'all just hear that? Sex trafficking, 3 years probation. Wow. Wow. Oh my God. You're hearing a lot of stuff. 3 years probation. Dang. No jail time. Dang. Okay. This is crazy. Oh my goodness. This is like, wow. This is some wild stuff. Wild stuff. Hold on. All right, let me finish playing. Come on. Dang. Who was this? I know stats. Yep, Joyson. White privilege. Yes, it is. No racketeering. That's right. Oh my goodness. Let me continue.
The allowance certainly wouldn't provide for. They would travel all over the world and make upwards of $25,000 to spend an evening with whomever was willing to shell out
$25,000 for a night? Dang, I'm in the wrong business. Just joking. Just joking. I'm only joking. But $25,000 for one night? Damn. You know how many houses and cars you could buy with that? Oh my God, that is crazy. $25,000 a one night.
The cash. Girls were making money hand over fist. They became addicted to LA's opulent lifestyle, expensive cars, designer handbags, luxury apartments, and sadly, for many of these women, the majority of their income went to supporting some pretty nasty drug habits. At the end of the day, whatever their reasons for making this choice, I never judged them, and I certainly don't now. Vicky, however, disgusts me. If she was indeed Michelle Braun's recruiter, then she preyed on the young, naive women who tumbled into LA with stars in their eyes and used them for her own gain. In 1997, 80s playmate Rebecca Ferrati made headlines when she participated in an True Hollywood story titled The Sultan and the Centerfold. Ferrati recalled her spiral into the world of prostitution. In her day, high-end call girls were being shipped off to Brunei to meet their clients. In the early 2000s, Turkey was the hot spot for these LA-bred escorts. Braun said during a 2008 Rolling Stone interview that her big break in the escort business was landing Turkish billionaire Hakan Uzan as a Nicky's Girls client. The article named Playmate Tashara Casino and Playboy cover girl Ashley Massaro as employees, as well as Tina. Hakan would send me an instant message at 3 a.m. and I would have to get 4 playmates ready right away, Braun told the magazine. The first flight to Istanbul was around 6 a.m. through Paris, and sometimes I'd wake them up in the middle of the night for that flight. The madam was arrested in 2007 and revealed details about her global hooking empire during the Rolling Stone interview, but Playboy and Hef had known about the racket for years. In fact, Hef even launched his own private investigation into the matter in hopes of shutting down Nicky's Girls and other agencies standing on the shoulders of the Playboy name. The hypocrisy here is palpable. Considering Hef kept his own harem of sorts, it's easy to see the mansion as a gateway to hooking. But Hef was determined to plug the leak, not necessarily for the benefit of the girls, I believe, but to maintain Playboy's image. It wouldn't look that good if a majority of playmates graduated to sex for pay. Playboy was supposed to be classy, after all. Eventually, I learned more about the situation from Mary O'Connor, who had become a close friend. During my morning visits to her office, I would hear about the goings-on and frequently come across documents pertaining to the investigation. Instinctively, I grabbed a stack of contact sheets off Mary's desk, thinking it had to be negatives from the newest Playmate test shoot, something I always pored over. My heart sank when I saw what the images actually were. In the photos was a red-faced, swollen-eyed Playmate, one that I knew well. Wearing a hot pink wig, looking like she was drugged out of her brain, posing nude for the unknown photographer, she was subjecting herself to the most repulsive and demeaning positions. She was showing parts of her anatomy never even seen in the pages of Playboy. I'm not sure you'd even see some of this in Hustler. In her drug-fueled state, she must have thought the hot pink wig would sufficiently mask her identity, despite her face being very clearly on display. Hef was determined to put an end to the Playboy prostitution ring, still unaware he had an enemy under his own roof, and put new restrictions in place to better ensure that his centerfolds weren't participating in Nikki's girls. If he found out that one of his playmates had been associated with this ring, they'd be stripped of any playmate responsibilities. I don't even think he considered that any of his girlfriends had been participating. As soon as word of these new restrictions started circulating, it didn't take long for girls to start panicking. "Holly, I need your help," the breathless caller squeaked through the splotchy connection. As 2002 was nearing its end, it was time for Hef to select Playmate of the Year. Amanda was in close contention with a handful of other girls, and I was not so quietly rooting for the fresh-faced beauty. I thought she was warmer and friendlier than most of the other candidates and would make a good representative for the magazine. While Amanda and I had met a few times, we were by no means close, so when one of the mansion butlers rang my room from the pantry switchboard to tell me Amanda was on the line, I was surprised. "Sure, what do you need?" I said. I figured she wanted me to put in a good word with Hef about her candidacy. People always thought I had a lot more leverage than I did. "I need you to talk to Hef," Amanda begged, sounding desperate. "They told me I was getting Playmate of the Year, but now they're saying they aren't going to give it to me." Immediately, my conversation with Vicky months earlier popped into my head. "Why?" I asked, hearing my own trepidation. "They asked to see my passport," she explained urgently, "and I don't have it." "Why do they want to see your passport?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "I don't know," she lied. "Well, where is it?" I felt like I was interrogating her, but it was clear she was trying to manipulate my position. If Hef knew she was a prostitute, I couldn't very well campaign for her as Playmate of the Year. "I left it at my mom's in Washington," she cried. I could hear the panic in her voice. Her dreams were vanishing before her very eyes. "Can't she just FedEx it?" I said, offering the simplest solution. She probably had her passport sitting in front of her as she spoke to me, but I couldn't let on what I suspected. "No," she said, offering no further explanation. There was no place left for the conversation to go. "I can try to talk to him, but he doesn't always listen to me." Ever listen to me, I thought. "But if this is really important to you, you should try to get your passport." "Thanks, Holly," Amanda said, letting out a defeated sigh. "I know you were supportive of me, and I really appreciate it." I later discovered that in order to stop the prostitution problem, Hef mandated that any playmate found to be working as a call girl would be banned from working any promotional appearances for the magazine. The same fate applied to girls who posed for competing magazines such as Penthouse and Hustler, as these were much more explicit competing publications. Hef considered this a branding issue. To serve as a message to future playmates, that year's Playmate of the Year candidates had to submit their passports for review. They were on to the Turkey connection, and if any girls had a stamp from that country, they were taken out of contention, as were girls unwilling to hand over their passports, apparently. While many playmates continued working for Nikki's girls, the promotional pay from Playboy couldn't compete with the escort business. I understand that Hef eventually decided to call off the investigation just as they had gotten close to a bust, no pun intended. Maybe he knew he couldn't do anything to control the former playmates, but hoped that word of the Playmate of the Year passport check had done enough to scare the following year's group of girls. Plus, Hef must have wanted to avoid the story leaking to the press, as it eventually would. At the end of the day, Playboy playmates turn prostitutes still isn't a good headline for the brand. But while Hef knew many of the playmates were moonlighting as call girls, he and his detectives were still completely oblivious to the business Vicky was apparently conducting under his very nose with his own girlfriends. Why didn't I tell Hef what I believed about Vicky? Because I knew that if I told him that I thought Vicky had tried to recruit me to be an escort, he would run and tell her verbatim what I said. She would, of course, deny any involvement. Hef might choose to believe her, reprimand me for spreading catty gossip, and then I would be subjected to Vicky's vengeful wrath. No, thank you. Even after reports came out implicating Hef's girlfriends in the Nikki's girls escort ring, I don't know if he ever figured out who was Braun's inside girl. In the end, it was a different money-making scheme that sealed Vicky's fate. Back in the early 2000s, invites to the mansion were still a prized commodity, and there was a market of wealthy men willing to pay top dollar for a spot on Playboy's exclusive party guest list. As girlfriends, it was understood that we could invite a few family members and friends to attend each of the mansion's decadent soirees. Ever the hustler, Vicky saw this as the perfect opportunity to make some extra cash. Like she said, she was going to milk this place for all that she could. For a small fortune, Vicky would secure eager partygoers a spot on the coveted guest list under her own name, telling the office they were cousins or close friends. And because greed seeped out of her pores like sweat, she couldn't help but recruit the other girlfriends to do the same. Vicky would do all the heavy lifting, for a cut of the profits naturally, and all the girls had to do was give the names to the office administrators before the party. I believe I was the only girlfriend she didn't approach about this scheme. My reaction to her hooking proposal must have turned her off. Vicky's greed became her own worst enemy. While it was in everyone's best interest, the clients and the girls, to keep the escort ring as discreet as possible, the Playboy guest list racket was less distasteful. So naturally, people talked, and word eventually found its way to Hef. A few days before the annual Playboy Halloween bash, I had come down with a nasty case of the flu. I curled up in bed all day, barely able to move a muscle or even lift my head off the pillow. Unbeknownst to me, Hef had recently found out about Vicky's guest list scam and confronted her. He was furious with Vicky and the mean girls. When some of the names on the guest list aroused suspicion, the paying customers were called by one of Hef's secretaries asking how they got the invite. They simply told them that they paid one of the girls to get in. Amazingly, Vicky had neglected to tell them it was a secret. Needless to say, they were totally busted, and even Vicky couldn't deny it. Of course, the evil witch was somehow convinced I had been the one to snitch, even though I hadn't even known about the scheme at that point. Part of me wishes I could now take credit for what would be her demise, but it was not my doing. None of that mattered because regardless of what I did or didn't do, Vicky was hell-bent on making my life miserable. "Honey, we're home!" Vicky squealed through the doors of the master bedroom, dragging out each word in a sing-song childlike tone. Terrified they were going to get kicked out, Vicky and the mean girls had all gone to a local tattoo parlor to get bunny head logos inked on their ankles, an expression of their undying devotion to Playboy and Hef. "Honey!" she cooed again, only louder. Uninvited, she flung open the doors and screeched like nails down a chalkboard. "We have something to show you!" "He's in the library," I croaked from what felt like my deathbed. "What?" Vicky shouted as if she was shocked I dare even speak to her. Leaving the other girls in her wake, she charged up to my side of the bed, her nostrils flaring like an enraged bull and her fists clenched at her side. She came on so aggressively I worried she might hit me. It wasn't out of the question. I'd seen some of the girlfriends resort to throwing punches over things as trivial as someone cutting the bathroom line at a nightclub, but I'd never seen Vicky so incensed before. I think mansion life was eating away at her. She had become desperate, paranoid, and apparently volatile. Panicking, I felt my sore muscles tense, preparing for a blow. "He's in the library," I croaked again, a bit softer, praying they would all just leave. "He's in the library!" Vicky shrieked, raising her pitch in an attempt, I assumed, to mock me. She was hovering over my quivering body, her eyes crazed and a vicious smile creasing her puffed lips. I stiffened, half preparing myself to run towards the door. I had no idea what had set Vicky off this time. "Fuck!" one of the other girls shouted, sounding similarly enraged. "Let's go!" Relief washed over me as Vicky turned around and began stomping away. Suddenly, she spun around and at the top of her lungs screamed, "Fucking bitch!" and slammed the heavy door so hard the pictures on the wall shook as if an earthquake had rattled the house. What had just happened? I thought, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I took a few slow, deep breaths to calm myself so that I could process the encounter. I was so rattled that I lay in bed paralyzed by fear, praying that Hef would quickly return. It felt like hours before Hef finally returned to the bedroom. He relayed the story to me about how he had caught the girls adding names to the party guest list and how upset he had been at each of them. For a moment, I felt relief. Oh my God, I thought, he's going to kick them out. They're actually going to be gone. But when he got to the part where they had gone to get their bunny brands as a sign of loyalty and how very sorry they all seemed, his eyes started to gleam with pride as a small smile spread across his face. His voice was shaking in that way that it did whenever he told a story that touched him. Are you fucking kidding me? I thought. He wasn't actually falling for this, was he? You mean you're really not going to do anything? I asked, my raspy voice barely escaping my mouth. What do you mean? Hef asked, truly befuddled. I could sense he was shocked by my response. They are genuinely sorry, Holly. They said they didn't mean to hurt me and are now more devoted than ever. I didn't say anything, but it was clear my silence spoke volumes, so he continued. They said they're going to put in a lot more time around here, he proudly stated. They even expressed an interest in coming in and watching movies with us at night. Do you know Diana actually loves black and white movies? I could feel the tears burning in my eyes as I tried to hold them back. Of course I didn't know Diana liked old movies, because she didn't. All the mean girls rolled their eyes behind Hef's back whenever he made mention of his beloved black and white films. Hef and I usually watched movies alone most weeknights, which for me was a much-needed reprieve from having to be around all the other girls. Surely the mean girls would have made good on their promises to Hef, not only in order to stay in his good graces, but also to drive me crazy with their ever-obnoxious presence. There was no way I could tolerate any more time around those girls than I already had to. No, I thought, I won't. I just couldn't stay any longer. I can't believe you aren't going to do anything, I cried, tears now cascading down my cheeks. I can't stay here anymore. I can't live in a house with Vicky, someone who's that mean to me. Even though we never talked about it, Hef knew the girls were terrible to me. He just chose not to do anything about it. This is my house, Hef screamed at me, his face red with anger. How dare you complain to me? I treat you like a princess. More like Rapunzel, I thought. I shifted my gaze downward and refused to react to his tantrum, which luckily proved to be short-lived. Hef calmed down just as quickly as he became upset. Well, I'm hesitant to get rid of Vicky because other girls seem to really like her, he said thoughtfully, folding his hands in his lap. This was code, of course, for her ability to recruit other girls into the bedroom. While he knew I was in the room, I wasn't completely sure if he was talking to me or just aloud, so I kept quiet. As he sat there weighing his options, I felt defeated. Supposedly, I was the love of his life, as he liked to say, but he was weighing my worth against Vicky's. We sat in silence for a long while. Maybe no one would recognize me as a former Playboy mistress, I thought. That was it. I would leave the mansion for good, my bunny tail tucked between my legs, and Vicky would win. Just as I was about to pull myself from the haze I'd been living under, Hef broke the silence. Well, you know, he conceded, I think Vicky was the ringleader in this whole thing. She really was the one that led those girls astray. I held my breath as he surely pondered his poor little damsels being manipulated by her. I think I'll tell her it's time for her to leave after the Halloween party, he said matter-of-factly as he picked up the bedside telephone to order his dinner. I didn't say a word. Even to express my gratitude might unintentionally change his mind. I just nodded as if the decision was an unemotional, practical one. On the inside, I was bouncing off the walls with happiness. Vicky was going to be kicked out. But on the outside, I had to remain calm and unaffected. I knew the battle was over, but I was careful not to rock the boat. That's always how things were at the mansion. You were constantly fighting just to stay afloat, to keep yourself from being kicked out onto the street. Losing sight of what it was I had even wanted before moving in, I became obsessed with being the last one standing in this perverted elimination game. I was determined to win. Chapter 6. I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir, said Alice, because I'm not myself, you see. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. In just 1 year, I had gone from the newest member of Hef's party posse to the one with the most seniority. Tina, Vicky, April, Lisa, Candace, and Carolyn had all gone their separate ways. In their place was an entirely new cast of characters. Bridget, my soul friend, Daphne, a pretty, cunning girl who quickly became one of Hef's favorites, Diana, Hef adored her because she had the helpless damsel in distress act down pat. Elizabeth, one of Daphne's sidekicks, who was low on the totem pole because Hef found her shrill and demanding. Whitney, at 30, the oldest girlfriend and Hef's least favorite because he considered her pushy. And finally, Amber, a seemingly sweet as sugar, quiet girl who defected from side to side when it came to the battle between the mean girls and me. While the girls were different, some things never changed. With the exception of Bridget, I was no more successful in making friends with this group of girls than the last. To make matters worse, since none of these new girls were being given the Playmate pictorials they so badly wanted, they therefore weren't kept busy with photo shoots, video shoots, and promotional appearances like the last batch of girls had been. With all the extra time the new girls had to spend at the mansion counting their frustrations, the claws were perpetually out. The Wednesday and Friday nightclub outings, which had seemed so exciting to me when I first joined the group, became dreadfully monotonous, not just to me, but to all of the girls. On Wednesdays, we would go to Concord or the Standard Lounge, and on Fridays, we would go to the upscale but not star-studded Barfly on Sunset Boulevard. Since there were no celebrities to be seen at Barfly, the girls hated it and referred to it as Barf Fly behind Hef's back. Each night out would begin with a limo ride to the nightclub, with Hef passing out his thigh-opening quaaludes to the girls in attendance. I still refused them, but many girls didn't. The evening out would always end with the girlfriends trying to convince Hef to go home a little earlier than usual. He usually insisted on staying out until 1 a.m., but on the rare occasion he agreed to leave early, we all breathed a collective sigh of relief. Daphne, Diana, and Elizabeth would beg Hef to bring us to cooler night spots instead of Barfly, but he was loath to change his routine. Also, his cachet on the nightclub scene had subsided over the past year. He had been going out so often he was no longer a novelty, and he was too high maintenance, always bringing a huge group and always demanding the best booth in the house, for the A-list clubs to be bothered with him anymore. The dreaded bedroom routine still went on after each club night, but the parade of new girls joining the antics had subsided. In fact, anytime a woman the girls found to be a potential threat got too close to Hef, one of them, I was never sure who, would give her a friendly warning that herpes was going around the mansion, and she would instantly back off. The rumor gained such momentum that I was witness to 2 instances of girls who had slept with Hef. One was a former girlfriend, one was a week-long fling, calling his office and asking that he pay for their herpes medication. Even though he grumbled about how he received a full physical every year, therefore it couldn't have been him that they got herpes from, he always ended up paying for the medication. I suppose he did it to keep them quiet and make them go away. Daytime at the mansion was still as uneventful as ever. Looking for something to occupy our time, Bridget and I became official mansion tour guides. The job required that we familiarize ourselves with every fact about every nook and cranny of the 21,987 square foot house and the 5.3-acre property. We hosted the frequent morning tours, mostly to servicemen and charity raffle winners, and we were even given custom bunny costumes made specifically for us, which was a real treat considering that even playmates weren't allowed to keep theirs. While most people use the term playboy bunny to describe anyone associated with the magazine or hef, the term actually refers to the waitresses who wore the bunny costumes at the Playboy clubs, which existed in the middle part of the last century. In the absence of these clubs, playmates occasionally donned the costumes for photo shoots or public appearances. I spent a lot of time in the mansion zoo, learning about the animals from the wonderful zoo staff. Hundreds of exotic birds and 3 types of monkeys called the grounds home. I made friends with a large spider monkey named Coco, who we eventually trained to be able to walk around on a leash. One day, as a favor to Hef, I decided to take on the project of organizing his bedroom. Even for someone with a lot of time on their hands, it was a formidable task that ended up taking several days. From the first time I'd ever seen the inside of his bedroom to my days as his main girlfriend, Hef managed to collect even more junk. A recent Premiere magazine profile of Hef had referred to his room as the lair of the Playboy pack rat. One of his most prominent collections was his film library. At that time, many of the films he had collected were still languishing in stacks on his bedroom floor in the form of 3/4-inch tapes, which look like larger versions of traditional VHS tapes, all in generic gray clamshell cases. My main order of business was carrying all the tapes upstairs and filing them in one of his many video closets so they could await conversion to DVD by his video staff, who also operated as a human TiVo, taping every television program he circled in the TV guide. This ended up becoming quite the workout. I must have climbed up and down those stairs more than 300 times carrying heavy stacks of tapes. It was particularly unpleasant when I'd unearth a tape and realize it was coated in years-old dog urine. As the piles diminished, ornately carved walls I had never seen, and probably hadn't seen the light of day in a decade, appeared. While it felt good to see the room come together, I must say I found some things I would have rather not seen. Topping that list, an old reel stashed away in a drawer full of porn labeled "Girl and Dog." It made me wonder if Hef had ever thought about who was going to go through his things one day after he passed away. He was so fastidious about his public image and about having every moment in his life documented and recorded in a way that showed his life the way he wanted it shown. I was disheartened to learn from one of his friends that he had plans to donate his scrapbook collection to a library or university after he passed, though he hadn't settled on which one at that point. It was such a personal and private collection, not just for him, but for anyone who'd ever been in his life. Hef holds the Guinness Book of World Records title for largest scrapbook collection at over 2,000 volumes. He keeps them in his attic along with desks and supplies for his scrapbook staff. Yes, he has a scrapbook staff to paste everything together. Good or bad, anything written about him goes in the scrapbook. Every photo his photographers take ends up in the scrapbook. Every girl he takes out is pictured in the photos, and the insinuation that they slept together is there, along with nude photos in some cases. I'm sure many girls included in the scrapbooks wouldn't be too thrilled to learn they could be public property one day soon. I know I wasn't. Granted, there wasn't anything scandalous about me in the scrapbooks, but it was humiliating to think that anything personal I had trusted him with could end up public property via their inclusion there, even if it was just something trivial like a sad note I had written to him. It was another thing that made me feel embarrassed, trapped, and forever branded. In another attempt to occupy my time and my brain, I began taking French lessons, acting classes, and real estate investment courses at UCLA. I needed to do something to stimulate my mind and avoid permanent bimbo status. The stammer I had developed continued to creep into my speech, and I hoped that furthering my education might somehow help. Bridget and I truly were kindred spirits. She had already received her master's degree, but felt the weight of mansion life affecting her head too, and began taking classes as well. The classes were the only part of my day that didn't, in some way, revolve around impressing Hef or conforming to his rules. He couldn't have cared less about what I was learning. To him, a woman's beauty is her most powerful asset. Unless, of course, she happens to be famous. Above all things, Hef is fascinated with fame, both his and other people's. He is obsessed with cataloging his life as a public figure and keeps records of every press interview he's ever done. Celebrity is one of the few things that can't be bought, and Hef prides himself greatly on his 60-plus years in the spotlight. Whenever even the most Z-list celebrity would grace him with his or her presence, Hef would drop everything to accommodate the star. It made me feel so incredibly insignificant, and it was embarrassing to watch him act even cheesier and more fake than he usually did. Hef never even bothered to introduce us to his guest, as if we were some lifeless mannequins unworthy of such an honor. While I had always dreamed of one day becoming an actress, it wasn't until I lived at the mansion that I began craving fame strictly for fame's sake. In some corner of my mind, I thought that maybe if I became famous, I would have some value. Perhaps I would earn Hef's respect after all. Maybe I could even score a pictorial in the magazine. My life had become so backwards. I had once looked at a Playboy pictorial as a stepping stone to an acting career, but over the past few years, I had become so absorbed by Playboy that I started seeing fame as a stepping stone to a pictorial. I was completely coming undone. "We have pink pussies!" a loud baby voice blonde shrieked, charging past security into our roped-off table at one of our regular night spots. Hef adored Paris Hilton. Before she became a household name with her television show The Simple Life, Paris was a notorious socialite who was regularly mentioned along with her sister Nikki in Page 6. With some sort of murky pink liquid, these shots were the pink pussies Paris referred to, sloshing out of the tops of 3 shot glasses, Paris squeezed her way into our VIP section of the club. Like clockwork, Hef motioned for us to scoot down to make room next to him for Paris. According to Hef, she was a celebrity, even though her meteoric rise to fame was still months away. I took it upon myself to always take note when a celebrity would make the effort to introduce him or herself to us, or even simply blanket the group with a simple, "Hi, girls." Many of them ignored us entirely and spoke to Hef as if he were the only person in the room. Since Paris took the time to introduce herself, she fell into the nice category. It was the heyday of the club scene in Los Angeles, so we would see Paris around semi-regularly. She'd always make a point to come over and say hello to us, and each time Hef would just beam like a perverted grandfather. At one point, I heard she even began discussing the possibility of doing a pictorial with Playboy photo editor Marilyn Grabowski. But a few weeks later, Paris, in the lowest low-rise jeans, the skimpiest blue top, and the darkest spray tan I had ever seen, appeared tableside during one of our club nights at the Standard Lounge to speak with Hef. I noticed she seemed more subdued than usual as she leaned into his good ear. She appeared to be explaining something to him. When she eventually walked away, Hef turned towards me and said, "She can't pose for the magazine because her mother said she would disinherit her." Whether that was true or if it was just an excuse she made up in order to back out of the discussions, I don't know. Right before her new Fox reality show aired, Paris's now infamous sex tapes surfaced, making her the most talked about woman on the planet. One Night in Paris quickly became one of the best-selling porn videos of all time. Posing nude for Playboy wouldn't have been nearly as controversial as her sex tape. What nude photos did for Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s, sex tapes were now doing for 21st century starlets. The Simple Life premiered to more than 13 million viewers. I certainly wasn't planning on ever making a sex tape, but any TV appearances I could get, even if it was just as Bunny number 2, I jumped on. Given our roles as mansion tour guides, Bridget and I were often drafted to help play hostess when television shows came to film. During a shoot for MTV's Doggy Fizzle Televizzle, Bridget and I gave Snoop Dogg the official tour. When MTV returned to shoot an episode of Viva La Bam on the property, I was asked to be the bunny that interacted with the cast. Desperate to swipe the spotlight away from me, Daphne came to crash the shoot, but her spot ended up on the cutting room floor. Shucks. When MTV Cribs shot a Playboy Mansion episode, only one girlfriend could fit in the doorway alongside Hef for the opening shot, and since I was his main girlfriend, I got the part. The crew took a liking to me and asked that I lead them along on the tour. One of the other girls in particular tried shoving her face on camera as much as she could. She was green with envy that I was getting this opportunity and rolled her eyes whenever they asked me to say something on film. Rarely would a request come through to shoot all the girlfriends together, but before the holidays one year, a Los Angeles news station asked to film a segment with all the girls in front of the mansion's Christmas tree in our pajamas. Hef insisted we each wear the same matching oversized flannel pajamas he kept in bulk in his closet, but I decided to wear my own slim-fitting pajamas with red Playboy bunny heads printed on them. Hef was extremely offended and demanded that I march back upstairs and put on the de rigueur pink flannels. Was I one of his children? I refused. I hated having to conform, especially to this group of girls. I also found his baggy, faded flannel pajamas terribly unflattering. I wasn't granted permission to wear my outfit of choice without yet another argument complete with flowing tears from Hef. He later apologized for being so upset after he saw the other girls pile around the tree with deliberate markers of their own. A yellow duck beanie, a Pomeranian puppy, etc. I wasn't the only one desperate to stand out. Those TV spots were fun, but I was really excited when Fox started shooting a reality television show called Who Wants to Be a Playboy Centerfold? The show was intended to be a series, but ended up getting cut down to just a one-time special. I thought this could be a chance for me to learn more about the behind-the-scenes operations of television, and who knows, maybe even get discovered myself. The show was shot mainly in a ranch-style home across the street from the mansion that Hef had recently purchased, which we would later take to calling the Bunny House. 12 contestants vying for a chance at a Playboy centerfold were moved into the house, 3 or 4 girls to a room. The girls would participate in several photo shoot challenges as they were eliminated one by one. Finally, a winner would be chosen to be Miss July of that year. Much to my dismay, Hef deliberately kept his girlfriends far, far away from the production. Desperately bored with my day-to-day life, I became obsessed with learning every behind-the-scenes detail about this television special. I even snuck into the living room during a production meeting to listen in as Hef clandestinely discussed the next round of contestant eliminations with the producers. I casually flopped down into a pile of pillows in the corner of the room so I could secretly hear their conversation. "We have to keep her. She's the bitch," a female producer exclaimed after Hef pointed out who he would like to eliminate next. "She makes great television." "I don't know. I think she's a little overweight," Hef grumbled. "She's right. We need to keep her," an enthusiastic male voice chimed in. "She's confrontational with the other girls in the house. She adds conflict." "Okay, well, we'll keep her for the next round and see how it works out," Hef slowly acquiesced. Wow, I thought. I was familiar with America's Next Top Model, the show that this Playmate competition show appeared to be based on, and never would have guessed that contestants were kept on strictly to stir the pot. It made sense, but in the early days of reality TV, viewers weren't as wise to the process as they are now. Interestingly enough, the girl Hef had deemed overweight became a favorite of a Playboy photo editor, and her centerfold was so well produced, Hef ended up selecting it as the winner. Since viewers wouldn't be happy with an antagonist winning the competition, the show was quickly re-edited to take out those pot-stirring bitch moments and make the winner look like America's sweetheart. By the way, I always found the winner to be a nice person. I suppose she was a little more honest and blunt than the rest of the contestants, hence the bitch label that people like to throw onto assertive women. Anything is possible, I thought. Maybe Hef will one day change his mind about my chances of being a centerfold, too. The television special was just the latest in a slew of media opportunities Hef had begun participating in over the past few years. Two of the most substantial, documentaries titled Playboy the Party Continues in 2000 and Inside the Playboy Mansion, filmed before my arrival in 2001, followed Hef's new life as a 70-something swinger. Anytime a Playboy-related program aired, it scored fantastic ratings. Middle America was still buying into the intrigue and racy glamour of the Playboy world, made interesting again by Hef's reemergence onto the social scene. Hef loved the documentaries that covered his life, but he also loved any chance to cross over to a younger audience. He was obsessed with appearing hip and relevant, which is how we found ourselves doing press in the middle of a Justin Timberlake video shoot in the mansion's backyard. "So, do you listen to hip-hop?" the MTV reporter asked. Hef began, seemingly at a loss for words. In early 2003, Justin Timberlake was at the top of his game. You couldn't spend more than 10 minutes at any nightclub in Los Angeles before hearing a track from his latest album, Justified. So much so that I still can't listen to a single song without being overcome by painful memories. When a request came through Playboy asking to shoot a music video at the mansion for the Nelly track Work It, featuring Justin Timberlake, the answer was, of course, yes. When it came time to shoot the video, the director offered Hef and his girlfriends small roles. Because some of the other models in the video were topless, it was deemed too racy for the United States and only aired internationally. During the shoot, Hef sat in his own wooden throne-like chair, bobbing along to the beat and wearing black sunglasses, with Nelly and Justin Timberlake on either side of him, while we danced around them in skimpy outfits. After filming wrapped, Hef was asked to do an interview with MTV News. All the girlfriends gathered around Hef, and I took my place at his immediate right. Hef continued to fumble. This non-response was completely out of the ordinary. Usually, he was a pro at these interviews, able to call upon a laundry list of canned responses to just about any question you can imagine. I listened to Hef rattle off the same answers he'd given a million times before, often word for word. I think I had unintentionally memorized some of them myself. He struggled for so long it was becoming awkward, and I feared the reporter had only asked about hip-hop to trip up the 76-year-old man, so I decided to cut in. "You listen to it out at the clubs," I offered, looking at Hef with a warm smile, aware that all eyes were on me. Yes, Hef said, regaining some composure. "We listen to it when we go out." He coasted through the rest of the interview on his Rolodex of previously used responses, and we wrapped. When I finally managed to get up to the master bedroom to change out of the red skirt and lace-cropped halter I had worn for the video, Hef had beaten me there and was already standing in front of the bathroom sink. "You," he began loudly when I appeared in the doorway, "have no answers. You are to keep quiet during interviews." "Sorry, I was just trying to help," I mumbled as I darted around the corner into the vanity. My eyes started filling with tears, as they did almost daily back then. I was to keep quiet, I repeated in my head. He was treating me like a dog. Sit, stay, no barking. Only I'd never seen him be so mean towards his animals. I had tried to help my boyfriend navigate a sticky situation, and now I was being punished for it, which made the reprimand hurt all the more. Despite his many abuses, I had grown protective of Hef and felt like the interviewer could easily have made him look like a fool. In the few years I'd been at the mansion, I'd never seen a question throw him so entirely off his game. What if the producers decided not to be kind that day? The way he was sputtering in front of the camera, they could have easily made him look like a senile old coot. But he clearly would have rather looked like an idiot than get help from one of his dumb blondes. When would I ever catch a break, I wondered. For the magazine's 50th anniversary, A&E wanted to shoot a TV special to air on the network. The program included a party at the mansion celebrating the magazine's iconic run and honoring Playboy's most famous playmates. As girlfriends, nothing was really required of us beyond getting glammed up and sitting quietly next to Hef, but I used it as an opportunity to try to give myself a much-needed boost of self-esteem. I decided to treat myself to something really special, a red Jessica Rabbit-inspired Barachi gown that cost a few $1,000s. I never spent that much on clothing since I was trying to put away as much money as I could, but I felt I finally deserved the treat. I always remembered how stunning the Bentley twins looked in their glamorous Barachi gowns, and seeing as though this was an extra special event, I figured I could splurge. You know, you will look back on this time as the best time of your life, Mary had said to me after one of my vent sessions. All the dressing up and things you get to do. I trusted Mary and always told her how I felt, but if this was the best time of my life, shoot me now, I thought. Foolishly, I'd long believed that becoming a Playboy centerfold was the fast track to fame and fortune. Boy, was I wrong. There have been more than 720 playmates in Playboy's history. How many of them can you name? Even if I did happen to score a pictorial someday, it didn't necessarily mean anything beyond validation. More than ever, I had begun to accept that I would never achieve anything greater than my role as Hef's main girlfriend. The handful of playmates who had become famous were all in attendance that night. Playmate and TV personality Jenny McCarthy hosted the event. Her beauty is matched by her wit. She ended up being the best part of the show by far, which included musical numbers and stand-up acts. 90s Playmate stars Anna Nicole Smith and Pamela Anderson were also in attendance. Barbie Benton, Hef's main girlfriend in the 60s and 70s, attended the soiree. While not technically a Playmate, Barbie was featured in several pictorials and on 4 Playboy covers. Hef went out of his way to keep in touch with many of his ex-girlfriends, partly out of sentimentality, but also, I believe, as a form of damage control. Keeping in the good graces of his ex-girlfriends was a sort of insurance policy. I guess he figured the regular invites back to the mansion would keep anyone from speaking negatively about him. Barbie would end up becoming a regular guest star on The Girls Next Door, and I ended up really liking her. She was quirky, friendly, and creative. Barbie wasn't a close confidant, though. Despite having dated the same man, we couldn't really relate on that subject. Sure, Hef was much older than she was when they dated. Old enough to be her father, though, not her grandfather. Plus, Barbie didn't have to share Hef publicly. He wasn't faithful to her by any means, but she could at least pretend the other women didn't exist. Never was she forced to one side or the other to make room for a gaggle of giggling blondes to line up around him. It was a surprise to me how mannered and reserved many of the former playmates were. Despite presenting Hef with a birthday cake totally nude while filming an episode of Girls Next Door, Pam Anderson always struck me as incredibly guarded and quite shy. Spending a decade being chased by paparazzi must have made her cautious around people. Like Pam, Anna Nicole was surprisingly quiet and very polite. I only met the towering blonde briefly, but she exuded the charm and etiquette of a real Southern belle. Like most former playmates, they were cordial with Hef, but I don't believe they knew him very well. During the Pam, Anna Nicole era, he was married to Kimberly and didn't socialize with the playmates much, if at all. Needless to say, those playmates didn't have to endure the Playboy casting couch that existed after the end of his marriage. I was beyond thrilled to meet 1950s pinup Betty Page, a living legend. While her hair had long ago turned gray, she still wore it neatly styled with those short, iconic bangs. In her later years, Betty became a born-again Christian and conducted herself like the gentle, church-going lady she was. Her name and likeness had become popular again in the 90s, and it was Hef and his friend Mark Rossler that found Betty and reconnected her with the business end of her pinup past. As a small memento, I gave Betty a Miss January necklace to commemorate her January 1955 centerfold. She later told me she hung it on her wall so she could always look at it. When she passed away in 2008, I was heartbroken but grateful that we were able to have met. Despite the odds, a part of me still held on to my dream of one day becoming a famous Playboy playmate. And after meeting these iconic women that night, I felt I should at least try to make my dream come true. "Do you think I could ever be a playmate?" I squeaked nervously to Hef, my voice coming out even higher pitched than usual. I held my breath. After living at the mansion for quite some time, I finally got up the nerve to ask about the possibility point blank. I spit the question out one evening while he was reviewing playmate videos in his room. "I knew you would eventually ask that," he replied solemnly, his eyes still focused on the video. Finally, he let out a sigh and said, "I don't think so, Holly. There are a lot of blondes scheduled for upcoming months already." A massive lump formed in my throat. Okay, I thought, fighting back the tears. I can take that. It seemed reasonable. Too many blondes. "Besides," he continued, now looking directly at me, "you don't have the look. You just don't photograph well." "Oh," I said slowly, careful to keep my voice from quivering. "Right." I'd always felt that Hef didn't think I was very pretty and that he thought I was lucky to be living at the mansion. But hearing him basically say that hurt even worse than I could have imagined. I had prepared myself for a negative response, but I had thought he would have been more tactful. Luckily, his eyes remained riveted on the TV screen so I could wipe away my tears discreetly. "I'd let you shoot for Cybergirl, though," he offered, as if it were some kind of consolation prize. Playboy.com featured a new Cybergirl each week. These were usually just photos pulled from the rejected Playmate test shoots. It was a throwaway offer. He knew it, I knew it, and I wasn't interested in being one of the many girls haphazardly tossed online without ceremony. If I were going to take the leap and pose nude for the world to see, I wanted to become Playmate of the Month. But then I thought, maybe posing for a Cybergirl shoot would show Hef that he was wrong about me. Perhaps the photos would actually turn out good enough that he'd have to reconsider me for Playmate. On the other hand, if the photos were a total disaster, maybe all those flaws that he saw in me were real and I'd finally be forced to face them dead on. Was I so hideous that I couldn't be a Playmate? "Okay, open your knees a little wider," directed the photographer as I sat facing the camera on a red sofa without a stitch of clothing on my body. The shoot took place at the Bunny House, the brightly colored mid-century home right across the street from the mansion. Naturally, I was a bit anxious, but Sarah, the makeup artist, who has since become a good friend, made me feel at ease. The photographers were tired of the heavy-handed 90s style makeup Hef still liked on Playmates. Since this was not a Playmate shoot, they took the opportunity to use a more natural style, which I ended up liking. When the stylists wheeled in the wardrobe options on a metal clothing rack, my stomach tied itself in knots. As Hef's main girlfriend, they wanted me in a short satin kimono robe, touting a plastic prop pipe, say that 3 times fast, to pay homage to my boyfriend. The Hef tribute had been done once before by his second wife, Kimberly, and would be done again by his third wife, Crystal. The remaining selections felt more downscale stripper than the old Hollywood glamour style that I would have preferred. "Can't you see too much?" I asked timidly. This was Playboy, I thought, not Hustler. "No, you can't see anything from this angle if you lean forward," the photographer reassured. "I swear." The photographer assigned wasn't one of the 2 used to shoot the Playmate pictorials, and I was worried that I was wasting my time. Since I wasn't getting the opportunity to shoot with the best of the best, I was terrified that my photos weren't going to be the home run I had hoped they would be. Despite what my gut was telling me, I continued with the shoot. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or bratty. "How did the shoot go?" Hef asked when I appeared in the master bedroom. After a long day, which included a car wash scene in February, I was cold and exhausted and wanted nothing more than to shower and crawl into my pajamas. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "I don't know if I'll like the photos." When the slides came back, Playboy was still shooting on film in 2003. I hated them. As I predicted, they were far more explicit than I wanted them to be. I felt like a fool for listening to that photographer. Adding insult to injury, the slides were accompanied by a memo from Playboy's Chicago photo editor saying something to the effect of, "Hef, do you want us to use these? They look like they were shot in your room with her wearing your robe and smoking your pipe." The comment made it sound like I was some interloper sneaking around the Playboy mansion taking photos without permission. Was the editor not aware that I was Hef's girlfriend? I felt so embarrassed. Usually, Hef made such a public fuss over whoever his main girlfriend was. I felt like I was the first one he neglected to do that with. It made me feel like I was not beautiful or glamorous enough to merit such praise. In hindsight, I know he was just sick of the high turnover with his past girlfriends. They were lasting on average about 6 months, and he was done floating any girl's ego. He had come to the conclusion that if he kept us broken and needy, we would stay. Broken and needy were definitely two adjectives that perfectly described me during that time. After about a year of stubbornly trying to maintain some semblance of individuality, I finally gave up on my short hair and started wearing clip-in extensions to give me the long hair Hef preferred. Feeling more disconnected than ever from the goals I once had, mansion life had eaten away at my self-esteem. I found myself constantly trying to compete with the other girlfriends who were all caught up in who was prettiest. It was a constant contest to see who could be the skinniest, tannest, bustiest, most baby-faced with the longest, whitest hair. We were all striving to win. We were trying so hard to stand out and be coined the hottest of Hef's harem that we completely missed the fact that we were making ourselves indistinguishable from one another. After thinking about it for a few days, I finally worked up the courage to ask Hef to scrap my Cybergirl shoot. With a huge knot in my stomach, I explained that I wasn't really comfortable with the results and would rather the photos weren't floating around the internet. He assured me that he would let the Chicago office know. And he did, but only after the pictures had already been posted on Playboy.com for a few hours. The editor took them down immediately, but that doesn't mean much. Once something appears on the internet, it never really goes away. To this day, those photos are probably floating around somewhere. Oh well, I thought, I guess there could be worse things out there. While I was racking up disappointment after disappointment in the pursuit of a career, my social life at the mansion wasn't faring any better. Most of the other girlfriends seemed to hate me with a passion, though I never did anything to them besides keep my distance. Daphne was the alpha female of that group, and the other girls followed her like sheep. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Daphne would have loved to install Diana in my place as main girlfriend. As main girlfriend, they felt my role was to be a sort of representative for the other girls and make sure that we continued to enjoy all the perks of living at the mansion. Under their breath, when they weren't making comments about my appearance, Daphne loved to make fun of my thin lips since I was one of the few who didn't have my pout inflated with fillers. I'd overhear them making comments alluding to the fact that I didn't run things as well as Tina, since Hef had so noticeably tightened his purse strings with the girlfriends in the last few years. The majority of the women who had done time at the mansion were born hustlers who knew how to milk a man for every last cent. That ability to manipulate just wasn't a part of my DNA. I was way too timid, and besides, I actually liked Hef. I wasn't interested in scamming out of him every penny I could get. Prior to me, Hef's girlfriends were masters of the hustle. The Bentley twins were showered in lavish gifts: Rolex watches, fur coats, matching BMWs, designer gowns, and even furniture for their off-property apartments, which were also paid for by Hef. When the twins, along with Brandy Roderick, moved out, the original 7 moved in, and Hef decided to tighten up the purse strings. Still, Tina was skillfully calculating and was able to secure each girlfriend a leased car, a sizable wardrobe allowance, and lavish Christmas gifts. But it was nothing on the scale of what the twins had managed to bank. When Tina left the mansion, Hef tightened his belt even further. No shopping sprees, less allowance, and off-site apartments were now strictly forbidden. Anyone who joined the Playboy harem was after something. Most of the girlfriends were looking to get their pictorial and as much cash as humanly possible, like hookers on the clock. While I wasn't after Hef's money, I was just grateful to have a roof over my head. I too saw my stay at the mansion as a once-in-a-lifetime sort of thing that could lead to potential opportunities for my future. "I don't care about money, I just want to be wonderful," was a Marilyn Monroe quote I lived by. I wasn't looking to get rich, but I was hungry for a career. I just wanted to accomplish something, anything. Sure, I believed I had come to care for Hef, but let's get real. It wasn't love at first sight, and I had my own set of goals. Greed just wasn't part of it. During a trip to New York City for Playboy's 50th anniversary party, one of many anniversary parties that would be held that year, Bridget, Amber, and I were excited to spend a few days touring the city in style. While Hef busied himself with press interviews, we spent time visiting Central Park, ice skating in Rockefeller Center, eating New York-style pizza, and jumping on the giant keyboard at the FAO Schwartz on Fifth Avenue. As required, we invited the mean girls to join us, but they couldn't be bothered. Instead, they ran off to Bergdorf's and purchased 3 incredibly expensive designer handbags. Though Hef threw a fit about the purchase, he let them keep the bags. While Bridget, Amber, and I were focused on the experiences and actually liked some things about Hef and his lifestyle, the mean girls seemed only to be focused on the money. It felt like each side thought the other side prevented them from getting what they wanted. Knowing damn well what the previous roster of girls had been given, it seemed the girlfriends decided I was the reason their pockets weren't lined with cash and jewelry, and decided to take matters into their own hands. "Holly, Hef would like to see you in his office," the secretary said through the phone line. The mean girls made sure I was routinely called down to the principal's office, so to speak. What was it this time, I thought. One girl in particular loved to whip up fictional stories about how I had supposedly wronged her. Anytime she would get heat from Hef for not following his rules to a T, this happened constantly with most of the girlfriends, she loved to deflect attention off herself by making something up about me. Every time she made a mistake, it was somehow my fault, though we virtually had nothing to do with each other. It was all bullshit. Hef saw through her. After all, she wasn't that clever, but he loved playing the game too much to call her out on her lies. Being able to hold her stories over my head was just another tool Hef used to manipulate me. Watching me get upset and squirm was just another way he satisfied his perversions. Every year since I had moved into the mansion, I made a trip to Disneyland for my birthday. I expected all of the girlfriends to attend, simply because girlfriends were required to attend all planned events on Hef's schedule. But only Bridget, Amber, and my friend Brittany showed up. The message was received loud and clear. I was being boycotted. They were trying to convince Hef that things would be better if I weren't around, because after all, he was constantly saying that he just wanted harmony among the girls. I don't believe that he really wanted harmony, not for a single minute. He thrived on catty drama among the women. Nothing made him feel more important than a bunch of girls fighting over him. At the time, though, we were all naive enough to believe what he told us. Unfortunately for the mean girls, their Disneyland boycott backfired. Not only did it make them look like pouty little children, which Hef hated, but it also allowed me to have the most enjoyable birthday celebration I'd had in a while. They wouldn't give up that easily, though. In an attempt to further drive their point home, they had all gone out to the Santa Monica Pier together and had a group caricature done for Hef as a gift. "Knock, knock," one of the girls squealed loudly through the master bedroom door. Hef and I were sitting in bed eating dinner and watching the news, as we usually did on weeknights, when the mean girls came in to present him with the gift. As he fawned and cooed over the picture, I noticed the girls exchange a few sly glances and smirks. It was as if they were saying, "See how great we all look without Holly and Bridget?" If Bridget or I had chosen to get a gift for Hef without including the other girlfriends, we would have been reprimanded for not including everyone. Yet no one, Hef included, acknowledged my presence in the room or my glaring omission from the drawing. It was as if I were a ghost. What Daphne and Diana didn't realize is that they'd never be able to push Bridget and me out as long as they were still aligned with Elizabeth and Whitney. Shrill Elizabeth and pushy Whitney were never Hef's cup of tea. I heard he turned each of them down the first time they had asked to move in, but eventually he kept them around as filler so he could reach the 7 girlfriends quota that had become his trademark. Over the previous year or so, since his girlfriends hadn't been gracing the pages of the magazine as often as they once did, the number of girls clamoring to be included in his party posse had understandably subsided. Whitney had always been Hef's least favorite, in part because she came into the group under some unsavory circumstances. "Hef, do you think Whitney could start getting an allowance?" Tina had asked. Despite having left the mansion months earlier, Tina still trotted around from time to time to see what she could squeeze out of Hef. "She works really hard to get all dressed up for you and to come to all the events. She'd make a really great girlfriend." At the time, Whitney was good enough to join him in the bedroom, but he wasn't too keen on asking her to move in. Tina had clearly been recruited to go to bat for her. "Actually, Tina, I'm hoping that with this next set of girls, expectations won't be so high," Hef explained to his former girlfriend. "Do you know I spent $2 million just on girlfriends and trips in the past few years? Most of that went towards the private planes he chartered, sometimes on the company tab, and the trips he took his girlfriends on, including a lavish European tour before I had arrived." "She's putting in all this time and all she's getting out of it is a drink and a fuck," Tina said, clearly frustrated that she wasn't getting her way. Like I said, this girl was a hustler. God, I thought, I could never get away with talking to Hef like that. The room got very silent as Hef sat still, staring at Tina. "I like to think of all of this as their dreams coming true," he said very solemnly. Even Tina was struck silent by how serious he was. Did he really mean what he was saying? It sounded so conceited to assume that simply being in his presence or bedroom was a dream come true for these women. The hurt expression he held on his face forced Tina to abort her mission. "Okay, sorry," Tina offered and leaned over to give him a peck on the mouth. As she walked out the door, she called out a thoughtless, "Love you." For months, Hef continued to reject Whitney's pleas to become a girlfriend, but eventually her persistence paid off, and one day she moved into the mansion. We quickly discovered she was a pathological liar, and it was actually pretty amusing. Her age, former professions, and life story changed daily. "Darlin'?" Hef asked, appearing in my dressing area one afternoon. "Yes?" I asked, pulling my nose out of my French homework. "I need to talk to you about something," he said through furrowed brows, pulling up my vanity stool. His somber eyes connected with mine. "Did you drug Whitney's drink last night?" "No," I exclaimed through a fit of laughter. "Are you serious? Did she really say that?" The night before, we'd gone to the Saddle Ranch on Sunset Boulevard for dinner. Whitney had quite a few cocktails and decided to ride the mechanical bull. While no one really thought twice about it, she was apparently mortified by the decision and desperately searched for a reason to excuse her behavior. "Yes," he said. "She feels silly about last night and says she would never have done it normally and believes you and Bridget drugged her drink." The smile disappeared off my face as I realized that he was taking her insane accusations seriously. "Bridget and I were so square we wouldn't have even known how to get drugs, let alone be tricky enough to slip them into someone's drink unnoticed. In front of a whole table of enemies, no less. I made this immediately clear to Hef. Come on, Whitney, I thought. At least go for something somewhat believable. "That's what I figured," Hef said, a smile slowly cracking on his face. "But I just had to be fair and ask." Phew. Luckily for me, it was Whitney making the allegations. I don't think things would have gone so smoothly if his beloved Diana or Daphne had made the claims. Why can't Hef see how awful they are? I wondered. I started questioning who would last the longest, me or the mean girls. I wasn't sure how much more of the absurdity I could take. After more than 2.5 years at the mansion, I felt no more sure-footed than I had on the day I arrived. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to set off a landmine of drama each day. At the time, I had no idea that their days were numbered, but I wouldn't be the one who took them out. It would take someone else to get rid of them. Someone a little bit more Hef's type than I was. Someone younger, blonder, and much, much ditzier. Chapter 7. Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone. Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It was April 2004, and the air had grown stale at the mansion. Bridget and I were constantly at odds with the other girlfriends. I could sense that even Hef felt he was ready for a change. It was only a matter of time before Hef started spring cleaning and invited in a new girlfriend. And just who would it be? Please be someone nice, I prayed. As you can imagine, Hef is both meticulous and exceptionally picky when it comes to his women, girlfriends, playmates, etc. He has a picture of every girl that's ever come to the mansion, mostly Polaroids. If you were visiting the compound for the first time, a designated staffer would snap a photo of you before you entered the party, as they did to me years earlier, and those Polaroids were compiled for Hef to review the next day. He would label them A, B, or C, based primarily on their looks, but also on how scantily clad they were, before having them cataloged in his social secretary's office. The A category was the most elite, meaning those girls were allowed to be invited back for all events, or perhaps even a playmate test or an evening out with Hef. The B category was reserved for girls Hef would be comfortable inviting back for larger mansion parties, like Midsummer Night's Dream, as well as some of the smaller Fun in the Sun pool parties. The C category was the label bestowed on girls that were only to be invited back if they were absolutely desperate for more warm bodies. Whether it's for his scrapbooks, his parties, or his magazines, Hef is obsessive about photos. When I lived there, he still reviewed most of the magazine submissions himself and always gave his final sign-off on an issue. He also felt it necessary to see pictures of every model that would be working one of his parties. Inside his room, there was a calendar of upcoming events, and next to it was a wooden box. Inside the box were photos of playmates and potential playmates attached to a note card with the girls' information printed on it. This was a distinctive pile because these were the girls Hef was considering inviting out for a night. Occasionally, there would be a pile in front of the box with photos of girls that had attended a mansion party or girls that had submitted photos to the magazine and weren't being considered as playmates, but were still cute enough for Hef to consider taking out. For so long, this box was my nemesis as I dreaded possible new additions to the harem. This time, however, I was determined to finally use the box to my advantage. Bridget and I were beyond tired of the mean girls, but we knew Hef wouldn't be content with just the two of us. We just got along too well for his taste. How could Mr. Drama King feel thought over, coveted, or interesting if his girlfriends actually got along? I knew Hef felt he needed to be seen with a gaggle of women in order to keep up his macho playboy image, and since he viewed Bridget and me as virtually the same person, I knew a new girlfriend would have to move in order for us to have a chance at getting rid of the others. The mean girls had already checked out mentally. Daphne, Diana, and Elizabeth had been at the mansion for more than 2 years, and by this point probably assumed they'd never be offered a pictorial. They each began focusing more on their lives outside the gates, aka other boyfriends in some cases, so it was only a matter of time before they moved out or Hef asked them to leave. But even that wasn't soon enough. Bridget and I knew that if we wanted any sort of influence in kicking these girls to the curb and figuring out who their replacements would be, we'd have to act quickly. A few days before Hef's 78th birthday party, I noticed 3 pictures stacked in front of the wooden box in Hef's closet. I grabbed the photos and info sheets to scope out our options: Tiffany, Nicole, and Kendra. Apparently, the girls were auditioning to be painted ladies at the party, and the body paint artist had submitted the images to the mansion for approval. The photos eventually made their way to Hef's private consideration pile, which meant he would definitely be keeping his eye out for them at the party. The day of Hef's soiree, Bridget and I went downstairs to the gym to meet the painted ladies as they got ready. It took most of the day for these girls to get covered head to toe in body paint. All three girls seemed nice enough, but Bridget and I decided that Tiffany was our favorite. She was easy to talk to and seemed really smart. Plus, she had a knockout smile, long ash blonde curls, and a gorgeous, naturally curvy body. More than hot enough to be Hef's girlfriend, but a refreshing change from the bleach blonde fembot look. Unbeknownst to us at the time, Hef had also made a pilgrimage down to the gym to check out the prospects and made a beeline toward Kendra Wilkinson, the most platinum and plastic of the bunch. Preparing for a mansion party took an entire day. The large parties were the highlights of mansion life, so the girlfriends were expected to look flawless. Couple that expectation with the fact that we girls had a lot of time on our hands, and you get marathon beauty days. All of the girls started their day visiting the salon to spend hours on an elaborate hairdo. That year, I had purple streaks clipped into my long blonde extensions. Costumes were customized down to the tiniest detail, and diets were strictly observed in the weeks before a big party. I was so critical of my appearance, particularly my weight. A girl could rarely be too skinny at the mansion. After all, there were expectations that we become the playboy fantasy everyone expected us to be. And in order to be that woman, it was essential that we look the part. Plagued by self-doubt, I was constantly troubled by an imaginary belly and would often add a single garter to my costumes to hide a tiny dot on the back of my left leg. God forbid someone might think I had cellulite. These days, I look back at photos from my mansion days and I marvel how a girl that skinny could ever think she was fat, but I suppose I was a product of my environment. After spending much of my adulthood as nothing more than a trophy girlfriend whose sole occupation was to look good, I guess I can't really blame myself. On the night of Hef's 78th birthday party, we made our entrance into the Great Hall around 9 o'clock. Hef's photographer Elaine snapped our obligatory photos. As was customary, Mark Frazier, the body painter, brought the painted ladies over for a photo with us as well. Kendra was already carrying a tray of Jell-O shots, and she nervously offered them to us. Bridget, Hef, and I happily took one each, as the mean girls just ignored her with an icy coldness. Hef wasted no time inviting the painted ladies up to his bedroom. Nicole was physically the least Hef's type with her curvier body and strawberry blonde hair, so I knew right away that she wasn't making the cut, despite her participation in the sack. Tiffany was the only one who wasn't willing to go all the way, good for her, so even though I really liked her, I knew she wasn't going to be invited back. Through process of elimination, the 19-year-old platinum blonde from San Diego was in position to be Hugh Hefner's next girlfriend, if she played her cards right. In Kendra's book, Sliding into Home, she describes Hef asking her to be a girlfriend and handing her a house key before he invited her up to the bedroom. Now, I don't know if Kendra's trying to sound extra desirable, innocent, or if her memory is just super rusty, but of course that's not how it really went down. Hef isn't stupid. He never asked anyone to become a girlfriend before they joined him in bed. And he never made a habit of carrying around extra sets of room keys. Because Kendra seemed pleasant, Bridget and I started encouraging Hef to ask her to move in. We openly and loudly chatted about how nice we thought she was. I don't know. She doesn't seem to have much personality, Hef responded. I rolled my eyes. Since when did he care about personality? Only a positive comment from Bridget or me could turn Hef off to this girl who was so clearly his type. Did I mention he hated it when his girlfriends got along? I could see what he meant, though. In the early days, Kendra wasn't the bubbly, bouncy loudmouth you may remember from the girls next door. Her personality could best be described as deer in the headlights. It was difficult to get a word out of her, and she seemed to have fried her brain somewhere along the course of her life. At the time, I just assumed she was shy or afraid of making a misstep while trying to navigate Hef's world. Despite his supposed reservations, he did continue to have her as a guest at the mansion. Kendra was still living in San Diego at the time, so Hef invited her to stay through a whole weekend and join us for the big Easter celebration that Sunday. Bridget and I had gone down to Melrose to pick out matching dresses for the festivities, including one for Kendra. I knew she didn't have a ton of clothes and was probably stressing out just like I used to. Usually, I wouldn't be so eager to dress like anybody's twin, but I knew how adorable Hef thought it was when the girls dressed alike. After nearly 3 years at the mansion, I was pretty attuned to Hef's preferences. I imagined him seeing the three of us together in matching outfits and thinking, oh, how cute. By getting Kendra to dress the part of a new girlfriend, I hoped it would help Hef make up his mind and set us apart from the mean girls who would most likely show up to the Easter event wearing jeans and bored looks on their faces. When we got back to the mansion, I went out to the room in the guest house where Kendra was staying, holding the new blue dress. I told her it was hers to wear if she wanted and that Bridget was wearing a pink one and I had a pale orange version. "Oh my God, girl," she said. I could see the relief on her face as a big toothy grin emerged. "You have no idea, I was going nuts." She thanked me profusely. For the first time in a long time, I felt as though I could relax. I had a good feeling about this one. Just because Hef didn't want another Bridget or Holly didn't mean we couldn't all be friends. I wanted her to feel welcome. Realizing that the opportunity may soon present itself, Kendra began asking questions about life as a girlfriend as she changed into the dress. She had already hooked up with Hef, so that part was no mystery. "Can I bring my dogs when I move in? I have to bring my dogs," she stated. "I have 2 dogs. I need a really big room." "I don't know what room you'll get if you move in," I said. "That's up to Hef." I have to admit, I envied Kendra's sense of entitlement. I had felt so lucky just to scrape by when I moved into the mansion, and here was a rookie who had just gone all the way with an old dude, and her only concern was how big her room was going to be. Though she wasn't as cunning or sophisticated as the other girlfriends who had inhabited the mansion in recent years, she seemed to have that same hustler mentality. Kendra was a stripper but had told Hef she was a college student because the body painter gave her the heads up that Hef didn't like strippers and preferred college girls. When Hef put a caption under one of the first photos of her that entered his scrapbook, he referred to her as Hef's new sweetheart, a 19-year-old co-ed from San Diego. "I need a car, too, if I'm going to live here," she barked. "I don't have one. And I want to get my teeth fixed. They're the only thing about me that I don't like." The balls on this girl, I thought. "Oh, you'll have to talk to Hef about that," I responded, shrugging my shoulders. I barely had the nerve to ask for anything for myself. I certainly wasn't going to ask for her. The Easter ensembles worked. About a month after Hef's birthday, the mean girls were finally given the boot and Kendra was officially asked to be a girlfriend. After 3 years of misery, which at the time I felt was largely due to those bullies, it was over. They were gone, and I'd never have to see or hear from them again. It didn't really feel real. I actually went down the hall and peeked into each of their former bedrooms to make sure they were really gone. "What did you say to them?" I asked Hef when he told me the girlfriends were leaving. I couldn't be certain that my prompting actually had anything to do with Hef's decision, but I silently congratulated myself either way. "I told them that Kendra's moving in, and Kendra had confided to me that she used to have a drug problem," he said, nonchalantly thumbing through a file folder he had in his hand. "Kendra told me they took her out to a club and offered her drugs. I told them I couldn't have that around her." Of course, I thought. I wasn't sure how they managed to sneak out of the house with Kendra, but according to her story, they did. If the story was true, the mean girls must have seen exactly what was happening and made a last-ditch effort to save their asses and sabotage Kendra's chances. Thankfully, it backfired. Kendra's arrival was the best news I'd had in a while. I was ecstatic to have those days of drama and backstabbing permanently behind me. Or so I thought. Just as he had done with me when I first arrived, Hef quickly made Kendra his golden girl. After all, she was the youngest and newest member of his harem. Immediately, Kendra acquired a black Escalade that she pimped out with rims, speakers, and every extra accessory possible. She also snagged the room she wanted, bedroom 2. It was the largest, most luxurious, and most plush of all the bedrooms, and she would instantly trash it. Kendra's room turned into a junk dump of possessions and reeked so badly of dog urine that you could smell it down the hall. I always tried to avoid staying in her room longer than a few minutes. Since the house was virtually empty, I decided to ask Hef if I could use bedroom 5 again so that I could have more room for my things and a little privacy when I needed it. Living in the vanity made me feel on edge. Hef's secretaries were constantly in and out of there throughout the day, adjusting his calendar and wooden box full of pictures. I liked all of Hef's secretaries, but I would have liked a little solitude too. Absolutely not, Hef squawked, setting down his reading glasses. Do you have any idea how much those rooms cost to rent? Actually, I did. Playboy Enterprises, a public company at the time, owned the mansion, not Hef. In order to live there, he had to pay a monthly rent on every room he and his girlfriends occupied. People may find it surprising that Hugh Hefner is nothing more than a tenant renting his room at the mansion, but that's exactly how it is. At the time, he paid approximately $25,000 a month for the master suite, $12,000 a month for Kendra's room, and $10,000 a month for Bridget's room, bedroom 3. The 3 smaller rooms were priced between $5,000 and $7,000 a month. Should any of the rooms be vacant, Hef wouldn't be charged for them. So Kendra's worth $12,000 and I'm not even worth $5,000 was what I took away from the conversation. Since I lived in the vanity corner of Hef's closet, he didn't have to pay any rent on my account. Despite these little annoyances, things were actually going smoothly in the house between Bridget, Kendra, and me. To my great relief, Hef mentioned to his immediate circle that he was downsizing to just 3 girlfriends. Just when I thought this new quality over quantity arrangement might mean less drama, Hef decided to drop a bomb on us all. During a Fun in the Sun pool party, Bridget and I were reading and sunning ourselves on side-by-side lounge chairs while Kendra sat on a floaty near the edge of the pool. As Hef shuffled along the flagstone walkway between us carrying his backgammon board, he paused and looked around at each of us. You know, he began, taking a swig from his bottle of Pepsi, I've decided I'm going to do a pictorial on the painted ladies featuring you and Tiffany. He nodded towards Kendra, but spoke loudly enough for us all to hear. Oh, wow, Kendra shouted. Thanks. Pretending we didn't hear a word, Bridget and I kept our noses buried in whatever we were reading. We didn't know what to say. I just want to put my book down and leave, I said defeatedly. He knows how badly you and I want to be in the magazine, and he just had to make that awkward announcement in front of us. I know, she sighed. We knew that Hef was trying to make us jealous and feel like shit, but I felt helpless, like there was nothing I could say. One particular day, Kendra appeared to be a little more somber than usual. Like all of us, she had her rough days, especially in the beginning, and we tried to coach her through, but that day she seemed really depressed. Bridget and I were desperate to win Kendra over and create the happy family we had always wished we had at the mansion. We're going out tonight, I declared, popping my head into her room. Immediately, Kendra's eyes lit up. Clearly, she needed a night away, even if it was only until 9 p.m. Hef was hosting his manly night at the mansion, which meant the girlfriends were required to make themselves scarce. Bridget and I thought it would be fun to take Kendra out for dinner. She was still new to Los Angeles, so we thought taking her out on the town would be just what she needed to lift her spirits. We decided on Nick's, a popular martini lounge in Beverly Hills, for appetizers and cocktails. When evening finally rolled around, Kendra seemed elated to be outside the mansion gates without Hef's parent-like supervision. Girl, do you think there's anyone famous here? She sort of shout-whispered in my general direction, craning her neck to see if she could spot a celebrity tucked into one of the restaurant's dark corners. I'm going to get a cocktail, I suggested, thinking we should toast our first ever girls' night out. Nick's was known for their creative cocktails with their cleverly punny names like Last Mango in Paris and Coco Cabana. Bridget and I each ordered some fruity concoction as Kendra pored over the menu with a furrowed brow. When it came her turn to order, Kendra announced that she would be having the sake to me. Excuse me? The waitress asked, clearly not understanding the order. Kendra had mispronounced the Japanese rice wine by saying sake as if it rhymed with take. The sake to me, Kendra repeated, the same way she had pronounced it the first time, only slower and more aggressively. I felt myself wince. The waitress appeared generally perplexed. I shot Bridget a look, but she was already making herself busy with the cloth napkin. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who are rude to servers. I could sense Kendra's frustration getting the best of her, but before I could intervene, she groaned and snapped the menu off the table, pointing firmly to the drink. The sake to me, she barked, once again mispronouncing the main word. Oh, the sake to me, the waitress echoed, clearly relieved that she finally understood what Kendra was getting at. Yeah, that's what I said, Kendra jeered, looking back at the table. Unfortunately, the Playboy Mansion was a breeding ground for that kind of arrogant behavior, especially among Hef's girlfriends, and shortly after, Kendra's began to take off. One day when I was out shopping, I fell in love with these adorable skirts at BB that I knew Bridget and I would both love. They were mid-length, flowy, and dripping in sequins. I picked out a pink one for Bridget and a cream-colored one for myself. I wanted to make sure that Kendra didn't feel left out, so I picked up the baby blue version for her. When I got back to the mansion, I found Kendra in her room and handed her the bag. I found these really cute skirts today and picked them up for us in different colors. I thought we could wear them out to the club tonight if you want to, I said, helping myself to a seat at the edge of her bed. Kendra lazily pulled the skirt out of the bag and ripped the tissue off from around it. She held it up for a moment before shoving it back into the bag. Yeah, I don't really like it, she said, her nose wrinkled and handing it back to me. I ignored the glossy black bag being shoved at my face. Sure, I didn't want to be a clone either, but couldn't she just have said thanks and tucked it into her closet? Up until this point, Bridget and I hadn't been on the receiving end of her snotty remarks, so I was a little surprised at the direction this conversation was taking. Well, I got it for you because I didn't want you to feel left out, I added. I won't wear it, she snapped back, dropping the bag to the floor and turning her attention back to the TV that so frequently occupied her hours. You don't have to, I said finally and walked out her door, leaving the bag on the ground. Honestly, my feelings were hurt. I went out of my way to do something nice for her, and it came back to bite me in the ass. I felt like I was damned if I did and damned if I didn't. I'm not sure if she ever wore the skirt. It's probably still sitting in bedroom 2's closet. Later that evening, after spending roughly 45 minutes twiddling our thumbs in the great hall waiting for Kendra to grace us with her presence, she finally emerged from her bedroom looking like a petite sex kitten in a red spandex dress, lucite platform heels, large blonde barrel curls cascading from her head, and bright candy apple red lipstick applied with perfect precision. Immediately, I cringed. Oh shit, I thought, this was going to be bad. Bridget quickly shot me a knowing glance, her eyes wide with concern. As Kendra sauntered down into the foyer, I braced myself for impact. The last time I had tried to wear red lipstick was 2 years earlier, the day I had cut my hair and Hef had bit off my head for it. It was such a memorable moment that when Kendra appeared in the main entryway with her lips painted bright red, my entire body tensed. It had been 2 years since my reprimanding, but the humiliation still burned inside me. I could tell that Hef was already irritated that she kept us waiting this long, and now seeing the red lips, he was not going to be happy. Slowly, he made his way to his newest girlfriend to more closely scrutinize her face. My jaw clenched as he inched toward her. What horrible thing was he about to say, I thought. I looked down at my hands and squinted my eyes. After what felt like an eternity just waiting for him to erupt, he finally let out a big guttural laugh. My eyes sprang up to make sure I was hearing this correctly. Why, that red lipstick looks absolutely wonderful on you, Kendra, he boomed, grabbing her arms and kissing her on the cheek. You look like you just stepped out of a 1940s movie. I looked over at Bridget, who had the same surprised look plastered on her face that I was sure I had on mine. Surely he was being facetious and was about to unload on her, right? Not only did he not despise the look, he thought she looked wonderful. My head was spinning. Kendra and I were not so unlike that red lipstick could have looked that much better on her than it did on me. What about Bridget, Tina, Vicky, April, or any of the other 5 dozen girls who were told never to wear the hue? I was waiting for the other shoe to drop when the house photographer gestured for us all to line up for a photograph, but nothing more was said. Did I somehow manage to stumble into an episode of The Twilight Zone? Are you kidding me? I whispered to Bridget when we finally piled into the limo. I could feel the hurt boiling inside me. She just shook her head. So he just loves red lipstick now? I asked sarcastically. How could his decades-long opinion transform so suddenly with one girl? I was crushed. That was the reaction I had thought I would have received years earlier. Over such a minor thing, I was belittled and made to feel like trash. But Kendra did it and gets praised? I didn't resent Kendra. It wasn't her fault. It was Hef who made me mad. All the playmates who were waiting to go out with us noticed how taken aback I was. That's one of the things about Hef. When it came to humiliating his girlfriends, the larger the audience, the better. I think he was trying to get to you, one of the girls whispered, pretending to search through her purse. I don't think he really likes it. It was her way of trying to comfort me. Seriously, I thought. Sure, Hef had a habit of pitting the youngest girl against his main girl. That tradition had been going on since the days of Mama Hen Tina and Babyface Buffy, but this was sick. Was he really trying to stir up my feelings of inadequacy by praising a 19-year-old? I was only 25, which was hardly ancient, unless you're talking to Hugh Hefner. There's no way he remembers, I said, only half believing my own lie. It was like 2 years ago. Holly, she said, taking a moment to meet my eyes. You know he remembers everything. I stared back at her and let this sink in. She was right. He knew exactly what he was doing. He cataloged shit like this for just these type of moments. Men don't achieve his kind of power and success by being idiots. He didn't want a big, happy family of girlfriends that all got along. He wanted multiple women frothing with jealousy and animosity towards each other. It was a part of his control game. I could never accuse him of doing it on purpose because he would simply brush off my accusation by declaring how preposterous it all sounded. And he'd be right. It does sound insane, but it didn't make it any less true. Quickly, I shut off my pride and put on the biggest smile I could muster. If he can pretend he doesn't remember, I can too. I can't let him believe he succeeded. He wouldn't use Kendra as a pawn to get the best of me. But believe me, he would end up trying. Despite my attempts to befriend Kendra, she continued to push me away. Hungry for her own team, Kendra desperately tried to make each new playmate who arrived at the mansion her friend, and her friend alone. Kendra's plan rarely worked, though. Most of the new playmates were nice girls who were eager to get to know all of the girlfriends. And let's face it, Kendra wasn't the easiest person to have a conversation with. When the new playmates would make an effort to spend time with Bridget or me, they were confused when Kendra suddenly lost interest in being their friend. A girl was not allowed to play both sides of the fence, so Kendra would toss her aside and find the next person to entertain her. And like any caged animal, it was dangerous when Kendra grew bored. Her frustrations had been mounting for a while. She had been at the mansion for a few months, and Hef hadn't asked her to be a playmate yet. Even though she was well aware that Bridget and I had never been in the magazine, she thought she was somehow different, perhaps because of the painted lady pictorial she posed for in the September 2004 issue, and couldn't understand why she wasn't already on the cover. I'm locked down, she would frequently say, referring to her new life behind the gates. It's no secret that Kendra was a pretty hardcore party girl before coming to the mansion. She battled drug addiction throughout her teenage years and eventually became a stripper to make extra cash. When Hef finally asked her to move into the mansion, Kendra thought she hit the jackpot. After all, wasn't Playboy all about excess? Money, parties, and sex. But, as she quickly realized, those nights were few and far between, and rarely as much fun as you'd think. The public's image of the freewheeling, leave your inhibitions at the door atmosphere of the Playboy Mansion was not a reality for any of Hugh Hefner's girlfriends. The atmosphere resembled the court of Versailles, with each guest obsessed with rank and standing. There was even a hierarchy among Hef's friends when it came to seats at the dinner table. At 19 years old, Kendra was stuck with a 9 p.m. curfew, a 78-year-old boyfriend, and a stricter set of rules than she had ever had at home. And now, adding insult to injury, she was finally realizing that she wasn't as special as Hef made her believe. She was just another blonde girlfriend, and life at the mansion wasn't all she imagined it to be. Much like the battle I endured and ultimately lost years earlier, Kendra was desperately searching for an identity of her own. Being a clone was soul-sucking. You were simply another blonde number on Hef's arm. In the beginning, Kendra was very quiet. The raucous, deep-throated cackle that became her trademark on Girls Next Door was something she affected in order to stand out. I know I have no place to talk when it comes to annoying laughs, but with Kendra, it was clear she was just being as loud as possible in order to make sure every head in the room turned her way. "Why is Kendra laughing like that?" one of the visiting playmates had asked me, unaccustomed to the new sound. "She's so annoying. If no one's paying attention to her, she just screams out of the blue." I just shrugged my shoulders, hoping it was just a passing phase. But Kendra wouldn't shut it off until she was certain all eyes were on her. The laugh never did vanish, though. Even today, she still adopts that cackle. I bet by now it's almost natural. Almost. Eventually, these sort of exaggerated antics became her trademark. For example, flying. She claimed to be so terrified of flying that she would put on a massive show in front of Hef during takeoff that resembled a loud, prolonged, frightened orgasm. It was embarrassing to witness. And wouldn't you know, when we were finally able to fly with Kendra on our own, read without an audience of men for her to perform for, she was remarkably calm during the entire flight. Kendra had been living at the mansion for close to a year when my patience finally started to wear. We were all out at the nightclub of the moment in Hollywood with some potential playmates. Bridget and I flanked Hef in a corner booth while the other girls danced and partied around us. Always trying my best to be as attentive as possible, I remained seated next to Hef the whole night, drinking and watching the clock. Immediately, Kendra hoisted herself on top of the banquette. Surrounded by the playmate posse, all of whom were her BFFs on this particular evening, Kendra put on a show, dancing as provocatively and wildly as she could until she was certain every set of eyes in the nightclub were focused squarely on her. In all of her theatrics, Kendra didn't notice the large candles near her feet. One minute she was shaking her ass, and the next a cascade of hot wax was scorching down my leg. I jumped to my feet and began swiping at my thigh. Kendra took a brief moment to take in the situation before turning her attention back to the other playmates and letting out a long, loud laugh, not even taking a moment to apologize. Hef was oblivious to what had just happened, only recognizing that something was wrong when I stood up and started peeling the wax off my leg. He finally asked what had happened. "Kendra dumped hot wax all over my leg," I said angrily. "She knocked that candle over while she was dancing, looked right at me, and didn't even apologize." "I'm sure she didn't mean it," Hef said, ignoring how upset I was and turning his head back towards the crowd dancing in front of us. He decided it was time to leave a few minutes later. Thank God, I thought. I just wanted this night to be over so I could forget about this latest humiliation, just as I had tried to forget all the others I had experienced since joining the mansion fold. As we navigated our way through the sea of gawkers, we were stuck in an absolute traffic jam. Picture Hugh Hefner, roughly 10 girls, and a handful of security guards trying to push their way through this dark, tiny, crowded nightclub. It was a nightmare. Not only was I angry and irritated, but my skin was still burning from where the wax had landed. Kendra was bouncing along behind me, laughing and dancing with the other playmates as we made our way to the door. She must have sensed my irritation, how could she not, but still said nothing. Instead, as soon as our group stalled, she threw up her hands and screamed at me, "Move, bitch! Get out the way!" I whipped my head back around and screamed right back. "Shut up!" I yelled in her face. "You spilled hot wax on me, don't say anything, and then call me a bitch? Fuck you!" Kendra's smile faded and the playmates got quiet. I never lost my cool like that, so everyone knew I was seriously pissed. "What?" she said, her eyes like saucers and looking from side to side at the other girls, grasping for some kind of support. "It's a song." It hurt enough to have to be constantly humiliated by Hef, but now I had to take it from a 19-year-old bimbo who I had been nothing but welcoming to. I was losing my patience. When we finally made our way to the door, I turned to Hef. "She's totally inconsiderate," I grumbled. "How could she not even say she was sorry?" I took my seat in the back of the limo, and much to my surprise, Hef finally opened his mouth. "You know, Kendra, you really should apologize to Holly," he said in a sort of fatherly, condescending tone. That's when the train went off the tracks. Kendra burst into tears, a hyperventilating, sobbing mess of tears. "You guys are my family," she wailed, reaching for the bottle of vodka from the limo bar. "I'd stick up for you guys no matter what." She pulled off the cap and started downing the vodka. The entire limo fell silent. In between swigs, she cried and blurted out some mumbo-jumbo through sobs that no one really understood. One of the girls tried to calm her down, but Kendra was either too drunk or too crazy to control herself. Hef, Bridget, and I fell silent before telling her that we would be there for her too. The whole display was shocking and kind of sad. It simply wasn't normal. It seemed as if Kendra, finally finding herself on Hef's bad side, broke down and retreated into a drunken fit. Like a toddler throwing a temper tantrum, she guzzled down the vodka in hopes that Hef would feel that urge to rescue her or care for her. It was both manipulative and incredibly sad. From that night forward, I was always a bit more cautious with Kendra. A woman who allows herself to enter into a situation like the one we were in must struggle with personal demons. I know I did. Kendra was harmless, sort of like an annoying kid sister. Our relationship would have its ups and downs over the next few years, but I learned to pick my battles and appreciate that she was just as damaged as the rest of us. She just had a different way of showing it. There wouldn't be time to focus on such things moving forward. Our lives were about to change, and the three of us would be further united on a brand new project. Like it or not. Chapter 8. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad. "How do you know I'm mad?" said Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. "Would you say that Kendra is growing up at the mansion?" posed Jerica, the young, freckle-faced field producer sitting across from me. It was 2005, and we were in the mansion's game house filming my first set of one-on-one interviews for a new unscripted E-series spotlighting Hef, his three girlfriends, and our lives inside the mansion. The question completely caught me off guard. Don't get me wrong, I was excited at the prospect of doing a television show. Day-to-day life was so monotonous that I welcomed any sort of change, opportunity, or even that chance at fame I had once hoped for. But at the time, reality TV still had a pretty negative stigma. My time at the mansion hadn't been all that rosy, so I was anxious about what the show would entail. Naturally, this particular question set off a siren in my head. "No, I wouldn't say that," I said, a bit more defensively than intended. "It sounds gross and inappropriate. Besides, she's 20 years old. She's grown up already." It's not like we really had a choice when it came to doing the show, so all that anxiety was really for naught. Once Hef approved the idea, it was full steam ahead. No one even bothered to ask our opinions about filming the show, even if it was just a courtesy. Trophy girlfriends are better seen and not heard. And what did I really expect? At the mansion, it was always Hef's way or the highway. We weren't given a choice in the nudity aspect of the show either. When the first season started filming, we weren't shy about being in front of the camera in various stages of undress. We knew everything would have to be blurred out in order to air on television, and the cameramen shot us from creative angles to avoid landing any nudity on the show. Halfway through the first season, though, someone must have realized that nudity could be shown in foreign television markets and on DVDs, so getting as much nudity as possible on camera became a priority. No one ever consulted the 3 stars of the show when it came to this issue, and I wasn't aware of the change until after it had been put into effect. As intelligent as he is calculating, Hef saw the series as an opportunity to capitalize on the new genre of television that was sprouting up and, once again, reinvent the brand while bringing in a fresh audience to Playboy. And the needs of the brand always trumped those of the girlfriends. It was understood that if we chose to continue living at the mansion, we had to agree to be featured on the series. I've always been a private person despite my public life, so I was worried about the repercussions. Would Hef feel the need to bring in more girlfriends for ratings? Would the spotlight bring out our worst? Would producers try to stir up drama among the 3 of us? Jericho waited patiently for me to fill the silence, probably hoping I would break. After all, she is an adult, I said, rounding out my thought. I had shown up for the interview intending to look as wholesome as possible, wearing a pastel print button-up dress shirt, my hair pulled back into a ponytail with newly cut bangs, and very light, fresh-faced makeup. Despite my years of acting classes, I'd never watched myself on camera being myself. When we finally screened the first episode months later, I was absolutely horrified by my appearance.
Okay, guys, do you guys want to stop and then start over for tomorrow, or do you want to continue this chapter? This is chapter 8 we are on, and it's a lot of minutes left. So we're going to stop because it says it's 44 minutes. We're just going to reduce chapter 8 again, stop from the beginning because it's like 3 minutes of chapter 8. So how you guys enjoying it so far? You guys understanding some of the stuff that's going on, that has gone on in the mansion? And don't you hear a lot of different crimes in this? And this man went to his deathbed without anything being charged against him. He lived his life. Did he not? He lived his life, didn't he? While Robert Sylvester Kelly is in jail. So many similarities, right? But Hugh Hefner's, his things was like on a higher scale. Like it was more numbers of women. It was, oh, wait till we get to Brooke Shields' story. Oh, Lord, y'all gonna hear it all. But nobody says anything about when you're a certain color. Yeah, it's really crazy. It's really crazy. You can imagine Howard Stern, some of the crap he has done. It's sad. It's really, really, really sad. But I just wanted to share this with you. I'm going to end this live because 444 wants to do something. In the next live, he's doing a Thanksgiving special for you guys. But I'm going to end this live, and the next one that's going to start is going to be Mr. 444 coming in with his Thanksgiving surprise. Okay? All right. You guys, I'll see you in a few minutes.